Hello and welcome to The Round So Far, brought to you by Amy for our first episode of 2025. I'm Xander McGuire. I'm joined by award-winning journalist and footy analyst Riley Beveridge. Kate McCarthy, she's not here yet. We'll get to that a little bit later on. But to the biggest story in football right now. You might have tipped the Pies for this Saturday night classic, but you wouldn't have believed that they would win by 91 points. Riley Beveridge, how did it all go so wrong?
Yeah, I can't believe this. The biggest loss for Port Adelaide under Ken Hinkley, a 91-point demolition. Now, look, they had a lot of players out, but big year for the club given the succession plan that's already in place. Josh Carr's going to be taking over the end of the year. There's already been a lot of questions around that since it was announced just before the season commenced. And I mean, it's not the best start to the succession plan. I mean, there's going to be questions the whole way through in terms of who's looking after this football side. And if you're a Port Adelaide fan, there's a lot to be worried about. And
to add insult to injury, they were taken to the sword by the guy who they arguably gave away for too little in the off-season, Dan Houston.
Yeah, he was fantastic. This was the big talking point out of this. His first game for the club, of course, served the suspension last week, so was unavailable for that game against the Giants. But 27 disposals, 10 intercepts, 6 score involvements and 5 tackles. I mean, he was just immense. He provided that ball-moving play that Collingwood wanted off half-back. A lot of clubs after him. It was a very convoluted trade process last year. And look, Port Adelaide, they're going to judge this in long term rather than just on one game, what they got back for Dan Houston, Jack Lukosius and Joe Richards coming to the club, as well as a couple of draft picks. This is what Dan Houston can do, though, off half-back. Nails that shot. Unfortunately, it didn't count. Young boy hadn't blown time on, back on. But, I mean, this is what he can bring to this football club for Collingwood. There were so many questions about them last week, having lost to the Giants and lost pretty convincingly to the Giants. But that is his weapon. His kicking off half-back, his ball movement. And they just completely destroyed Port Adelaide in that area of the ground tonight.
Houston undoubtedly providing a much-needed spark for the Pies, but their pressure was incredible compared to last week.
Yeah, last week, the big question mark on the Pies was just their leg speed. I mean, the Giants made them look old, they made them look slow, which was the question mark around Collingwood all the way through the summer. But they responded tonight, 68 tackles to 43. Their pressure around the ball was immense. A lot of these pressure acts here, Lachie Schultz, you can see him join in that tackle there. He was fantastic. I thought it was just about, if not one of, his best games for the club so far. I mean, there's been a lot of knockers on his trade from Fremantle, and with rightly so. I mean, he hasn't really produced the goals, but that's what he can produce, that pressure, that tackling around the ground. He was immense in that area. There's another one for him there. So he was great all night, and Collingwood certainly showed that. I mean, they're a bit quicker around the ball. They dropped Scott Pendlebury into the sub-role. They got some leg speed through the middle across the course of the night, and they really responded to that defeat last week to the Giants.
Jack Lukosius kicked the first goal of the game, but after then the Pies were on top. But it was really in that third quarter, late second quarter, where the switch was flicked, really.
Yeah, 10 straight goals for the Collingwood on either side of half-time, and that's where they really blew this game open. I mean, it was a 91-point margin in the end, and this was the core of it. 7 goals to 1 in that quarter, 18 more disposals, 7 more inside 50s. And just have a look at some of these goals. The lack of pressure when Collingwood kicks them is astounding from Port Adelaide, and I guess that would be the biggest concern for them. I mean, you're already coming to the year with question marks around the coaching situation. Josh Carr's going to take over at the end of the year. Ken Hinkley's in charge for now, but you'd have to think Josh Carr's calling a lot of the shots. I mean, that's what a succession plan is. You leave it to the guy who's about to take over while the old guy does the mentoring role across the course of the year. So there were question marks around when this decision was made, whether or not it'd be the right call long term. I think if you're a Port Adelaide fan, you're sitting here right now going, gee, did we make the right decision? I mean, it's only one game, it's a long season, and Port Adelaide will have the chance to respond next week, but it's not the best start to the succession plan, and there's always going to be question marks around succession plans. There's been a lot of failures in the past. There's been a lot of successful ones as well. But, I mean, it adds another level of attention to this Port Adelaide Football Club in 2025, and it's not the best start for them.
To the grand final rematch, where it was far from a replay. The Swans right in it towards the end, but the Lions get the Chockies once again. What do you make of this matchup?
It was an incredible game. I mean, it was one without... I mean, Sydney started really well, and you got the sense that, yeah, they're really looking to respond to that grand final loss of last year where they got absolutely put to the sword by the Lions. But also responding to last week's defeat to Hawthorn in that opening round clash. That's the big moment right there. That was the turning point. Matt Roberts, you can see the score, 4 minutes to go, a 6-point game. He gives it straight to Josh Dunkley, who kicks the goal. And in the end, they win by 4 points to the line, so that proves a crucial moment. Isaac Heaney went back and slotted this one here, and all of a sudden you're thinking it is game on again, 60 seconds on the clock, and they had their chances. I mean, we're about to see a late snap out of congestion. Chad Warner was fantastic across the course of the game. This one just didn't break the right way for the Swans, but a bit better signs for them. But Brisbane, given the amount of injuries and the amount of adversity, which we'll get to in just a little bit, it was a big win for them. And especially given last week, their game being postponed, they come in today and they get the points in their first game of the season.
Let's stick with the Swans. 0-2 for the first time since 2019, and both those games at the SCG. If you're a Swans fan, is there a bit of concern?
I think you would be concerned if you supported just about any other side in the competition. But the fact is, Sydney have been here before and they've done it before. They made finals in 2023, having been 3-6. They made finals, of course, in 2017, having been 0-6. So, I mean, the alarm bells are there. They've had two very good games, though. I mean, they might have just played the two best teams in the competition in Hawthorn and then Brisbane, even though they are at home. But I'll tell you what, they might be ringing the alarm bells next week. They go to Fremantle. It's a massive game for both sides. We'll get to the Dockers in just a little bit, but both of those sides winless to start the season, so it's going to be a massive occasion next week for both teams.
A lot of talk about the Dacos brothers, but how about the Ashcroft brothers? Unbelievable. We had Levi play his first game today, and he was pretty impressive.
Well, imagine the Lions. I mean, you come into the year, you've got Will Ashcroft, who's been best on ground in a premiership team just a couple of months ago, and then you bring in Levi Ashcroft with the top 5 pick. I mean, this sort of stuff Levi Ashcroft has done for the best part of 3 years as an underage footballer. 25 disposals, 6 score involvements, 4 clearances. And it came in sort of not the ideal preparations for him, given he probably thought he was going into this game as the sub, and then Charlie Cameron's got a slight calf strain, so he just misses out towards the end of the match, and he's a late withdrawal. All of a sudden, Levi Ashcroft comes into the 22, and he's just about best on ground. So the rich get richer with the Lions. I mean, they bring in Sam Marshall as well as another academy player, and Levi Ashcroft, he could play 25 games for them this year. He's such a fantastic footballer, and the two Ashcroft boys going in there is going to be hard to stop throughout the year.
Not a clean bill of health for the Lions. A couple of worries that come out of the game today. Kai Loman and Brandon Starcevic. Talk us through that.
Yeah, Brandon Starcevic, this is the real big concern, I think, for them. So this is his 3rd concussion in 12 games now. Of course, he would have missed the opening round clash, given he was returning from a concussion that he suffered in pre-season. So he comes off there, looks worse for wear. That's not great for him. And then Kai Loman, we know how important he is and how important he was in that premiership side last year. He was big on grand final day. That just looks like your classic syndesmosis injury, which is a real shame for him. I mean, Chris Fagan said they'd have to wait to see what the scan results were before they could determine exactly how long he had missed, but he was subbed out early in this game, didn't take part again. And of course, the Lions, Charlie Cameron comes out of the side late in the game, so the fact that they battled through that adversity and still managed to get the points, I think that's a real mark of just how strong they're going to be this year.
Let's go to the other Saturday night game, the Dogs and the Roos, where the Roos gave them a bit of a scare. They showed a bit of maturity that maybe we haven't seen just yet, but late or early in that last quarter, we saw the Dogs really come to the fore, and Matty Kennedy was a big part of it as well.
Yeah, his first game for the club, coming from Carlton across the course of the off-season, and has that one off the ground, which sets it up. That's a great soccer move there from Matty Kennedy, and these 3 goals they kicked in 6 minutes to start the last quarter, and that really took the game away from North Melbourne. Matty Kennedy, of course, setting up Aaron Norton there as well. So, for the Dogs, I mean, they're missing Marcus Bontempelli, they're missing Liam Jones, Adam Treloar, Cody Waitman, Jason Johannesson, a lot of experience coming out of that side. But I guess for them, the important thing would be some of their youngsters stepped up, and we're going to get to the experience of both of these sides in just a little bit. But Joel Frazier had some really important moments early in that last quarter. Riley Sanders kicked that goal, so that'd be the most promising thing to take out of this one for the Western Bulldogs.
In terms of that injury list, the 2 guys that were on it right up until the final buzzer in Ed Richards and Bailey Dale, and Bulldog supporters will be thanking their lucky stars that both of them were out there today. Yeah,
I was out at the Whitten Oval last week, and when both Ed Richards and Bailey Dale made it through that final training session before this game, I mean, there was a few sighs of relief. Marcus Bontempelli not in the side would mean Ed Richards had played through the midfield. He was just about best on ground, 30 disposals, 7 clearances and a goal. And then Bailey Dale had the quad problem going into it. He was another one who was touch and go, 29 touches and 2 goals. I mean, if both of these guys had missed, the Dogs would have been without all of their top 5 finishes in last year's best and fairest. So they needed these guys there tonight. They proved crucial in the win. They were just about 2 of the best players on the ground, and they made North Melbourne pay at crucial moments when the score was relatively close. I mean, you can see there Bailey Dale kicks that classy goal. That was right when North Melbourne was coming in this one. So 2 really massive positives for the Dogs there going into the season.
You probably expect the Dogs to get up in this one, and the narrative is that they're the experienced side that consistently plays finals, and the Roos are on the way up. But we've crunched the numbers on this, and maybe they're not as dissimilar as you might think.
Well, it's not as you might think, as you mentioned. So North Melbourne's slightly younger, but in terms of games, way more experience than the Western Bulldogs. The Dogs had more players with less than 50 games, and they had less players with more than 100 games, which just goes to show, I think that's a question mark over North Melbourne. I mean, a lot of the commentary around North Melbourne going into the season was, when are they going to take this next step? It's the 3rd year under Alistair Clarkson. He named a couple of examples in pre-season around, right, this is when Brisbane took the next step and became a huge premiership side. This is when Hawthorn, under his guidance in 2007, made the finals for the first time, had that really good win over Adelaide. That's when they took the next step. I think everyone thought that was going to be it for North Melbourne, but given the length of the Western Bulldogs injury list today, I think this is a real chance for North Melbourne to start the season on the right track. And they showed signs, but I think the fact they couldn't win, I mean, everyone's waiting for them to go to that next level. They still haven't got it yet. And I think that'd be the real frustration coming out of this one for North Melbourne, just that they haven't gone to that next level just yet.
A sickening incident towards the end of the game between Luke Cleary and Jackson Archer. You know, that's what happens in footy. There's incidents like that, but it was pretty troubling to see Luke Cleary motionless on the ground there. We do have a bit of information on that. He's been taken to hospital, but in the rooms after the game, he was up on his feet and moving around before taken away for a bit of a precautionary check. Not good to see that in the game.
No, it was just brutal, wasn't it? I mean, I think the match review will probably look at it. They have to look at everything, and especially incidents where there are big head knocks. I don't know exactly what the outcome will be there because it seemed like it was a football incident, and Jackson Archer limped off as well. He came back onto the field later in the game, but you just hope that for the best for Luke Cleary because it's really scary when you see incidents like that in the football field.
To the Cattery earlier today where we saw another unexpected smashing. The Cats winning by 78 points against Freo, who really were the much-hyped team of this pre-season, but the Cats just blew them away with pressure again.
Yeah, they just dominated them out of the middle. I mean, the stats at half-time were insane. They finished with, 40 more tackles than the Dockers, which is a great sign for Geelong, but this is incredibly worrying for Fremantle, given the raps on them in pre-season, given how they were meant to take the next step, and they just got put to the sword by a Geelong side that was hungrier, that wanted it more, that was more lively around the footy, and that just didn't let them breathe across the course of the night. I mean, they had, what was it in the end? Plus 18 for tackles inside 50, 23-5, and they just set the tone from their work around the stoppage. They were great in every aspect of this game. Geelong, we're going to get to Fremantle in just a little bit, but I thought this was arguably one of the most worrying performances of the round from the Dockers' perspective as well.
Sticking on the Cats, it brings us to our Saturday star, and well, the blonde bombshell has well and truly entered the villa now. Bailey Smith was extraordinary out there today. Talk us through his performance, his first game in a long time.
Yeah, 573 days, and he looked like he hadn't missed a beat. It wouldn't have shocked me if their opening round clash against Brisbane last week, if it had gone ahead, if Bailey Smith would have missed that one, given he tweaked the knee right in the eve of pre-season. But he comes out today and just doesn't look like he's shown any signs of wear at all. 32 disposals, 12 score involvements, 7 clearances, 5 tackles, 693 metres gained. This is what they would have thought they were getting from Bailey Smith. I mean, the ability to go forward and impact the scoreboard as well. He kicks that goal there, his first goal for the club. They'll just hope to see this Bailey Smith 20-odd times across the course of the season. And if that's the case, I think the one worry coming into the season for Geelong was just the strength and the depth through the midfield. And Patrick Dangerfield has gone out of that midfield group. He spent a lot of time forward today and actually thought he impressed in that forward role as well. He was really good and really strong in that area of the ground. Bailey Smith's filled his void pretty seamlessly. And I mean, if they can, as I said, get 20-odd games like that from Bailey Smith, they're going to be a premiership contender once again, the Cats.
We touched on this in pre-season, how Geelong has slowly transitioned into becoming one of the fastest moving teams of the ball in the game. And as you can see, they're getting scores on the board because of that today.
Yeah, so this is their third highest score since 2018. And you can see a couple of them there against Fremantle. That one against West Coast, that was a real aberration. I mean, the Eagles got smashed on that day and their season was done when that game went ahead. So in reality, I mean, this is what Geelong would have wanted to start the season looking like. I mean, they come into the year with some question marks over their age, their leg speed. They bring in Bailey Smith. No one's really sure how that's going to work given he spent such a long period of time out of the game. But their scoring power, they're one of the toughest teams to stop now in all aspects of the game. And the fact they've got this midfield group now that's firing on all cylinders with Bailey Smith leading the charge, they're going to be a dangerous proposition once again. You
touched on it before, but as good as Geelong were, Freo were terribly disappointing after a much-hyped pre-season campaign.
Yeah, they lose by 78 points today. And I mean, if it wasn't for Murphy Reid, and we'll get to him in just a little bit, but if it wasn't for Murphy Reid, this would be without positive whatsoever for the Dockers. We heard from Justin Longmuir on the eve of the season saying they didn't want to give up too much of what they were going to do in the year. They wanted to play vanilla football through pre-season. And I was critical of those comments at the time because I remember thinking to myself, well, all this does is it puts so much attention from your fan base on your first month of the season. Because all Dockers fans are out there going, right, if this is vanilla football, I'm excited to see how much is going to change in the first month. And this is what we got from Fremantle. I mean, this is a top 4 list. Undoubtedly a top 4 list. I know Shea Bolton wasn't there today and he's a big loss for him, of course. And obviously Michael Walters wasn't out there and Nat Fyfe, Hayden Young, these good best 22 players. But they should have been a lot better than that today. And this is a real worry for the Dockers now with the game against the Swans, who showed a lot of improvement today next week. I mean, you wouldn't want to start the season 0-2 given the amount of attention that was on you over the pre-season. I think there's more pressure on Fremantle than any other side in the competition. And I think this result's just going to heap more pressure on them going into that round 2 clash.
Well, absolutely vanilla they were until, as you mentioned, Murphy Reid came to the fore in the second half. Not much of a first half for him either, but some eyebrows were raised with this one early and he just went from strength to strength after it.
So what did you do? What did he kick? 4 goals in 6 minutes. I think he was the first player to kick 4 goals in a quarter on debut since 2000. So he was absolutely outstanding in this term. And really, this was the only positive for the Dockers. And he sort of single-handedly dragged them back into the game. I mean, when this burst started, they were, 40, 50 points down. He gave him a chance at 3/4 time and his teammates didn't go with him. But this is the Murphy Reid that we've seen in under-18s footy for so long. strong. He drifted a bit further in the draft than I thought he might. I think he got out to a pick in the late teens, and the Dockers would be wrapped with that. Earns his debut with the work he did across pre-season, and he was their best player today, and could be headed for a rising star nom. But there's a lot of guys out there who played really well across the course of the season that'd be right in contention for that rising star nom as well. And we're going to get to Sam Lawler in just a bit, who is very exciting as well.
Before that, we're going to go to Amy Clanger for the week, and this one's a bit of a different one. It's an organisational clanger. It's a round so far clanger, and Kate McCarthy, you are right in the firing line for, well, if you're in footy, they say don't ever put your wedding on grand final day, but we're saying do not put your wedding around the first episode of the round so far for the year. Let's hear from Kate.
Hey everyone, thank you so much for holding fort tonight. I had to pop out of the country just for some very important business last minute, but hope the show goes well, and I will be back next week.
That is an absolute clanger from Kate. We're looking forward to having Kate McCarthy on the round so far this year, but you can't get married across opening round and round one. You can't have your honeymoon on round one. You've got to be back by now. But no, congratulations to Kate and her partner Kate as well. It was great to see them get married, and I'm sure they'll be having lots of fun right now.
Now, for all the fans that were begging for footy in Melbourne over opening round, didn't get it, what a showpiece it was on Thursday night when Carlton Richmond took to the greatest stage in footy in front of 80,000 people. And, well, it could be the biggest upset of the year. And how about that from Seth Campbell as well?
Could be the best celebration of the year as well. I've never seen that in a footy field. This was one of the best stories you'll see in footy all year. I mean, this was absolutely fantastic. From a Richmond side that's been written off from pillar to post across the course of the summer. We know they finished on the bottom of the ladder last year. We know a lot of players left this football club, but it was just found it really difficult not to be really happy for this football club, and particularly for Adam Uze as well. I mean, you only have to look at the amount of Richmond players that used the term aura in the 24 hours after this game to know just how much that would have motivated them going into this game, that we want to do this for the coach. And I think if you're a power broker at Richmond, and if you did have any question marks on Adam Uze after his first 12 months in charge, I think the reaction to the 24 hours afterwards and how much his players went to bat for him in those 24 hours after just showed how much they care for him as well. And we're going to get to some of the things they did right across the course of the night. There was plenty of that. It might have been the third game of the season, but I think this is going to be hard to top for one of the best wins of the year.
Some really encouraging signs in terms of seeing what Adam Uze wants to implement, but the Tigers also just pounced on what Carlton did wrong.
Yeah, some of this is just absolutely awful from Carlton. It's atrocious from Carlton, but a lot of it was born from the pressure that Richmond put on them. And they were 41 points down in this game. So it would have been very easy for a lot of young players to drop their heads and for this to balloon out to a 100-point loss. But the fact they were able to put the pressure on and get back into this game, I mean, that's just a skill error. That happened to Carlton all the way through. But they had the youngsters that were able to take advantage of that and pay for it. I've seen Adam Uze speak before about the fact that he wants this Richmond team to look like it did between 2017 and 2020, and it did on this night. I mean, these players are going to get better. The improvement in the team's going to get better, but a lot of what they did right looked like that Tiger team that we saw 5 or 6 years ago that was winning 3 flags in 4 years, and that's the greatest bit of hope that will give Richmond supporters across the course of the year. I mean, they're not going to win 15 games this year. It's going to be slow going for Richmond, and they might find it very difficult throughout patches of the year. But when you're finding those difficult patches, this is the moment that Richmond fans are going to remember. And this is the moment that Richmond fans are going to be like, right, I can see how it gets better because I've seen it before. They needed a win like this early in the year, so it didn't become a hard slog for them, and you're rapt to see them get it.
In terms of youngsters that added a bit of spark, Sam Lawler was incredible. Fears that he might have been a bit underdone because he had a bit of time off with that fractured jaw in the pre-season and straight into a game, but wow.
He was just clean. Look at every single touch that he gets here is just a one-touch action. He doesn't fumble at all. That was the moment he injected himself into the game, and he was fantastic across the course of it. 18 disposals, 8 score involvements, 2 goals. Kicked the sealer as well late in the piece as well, or the one that got Richmond fans really think that they could win this game. So he was remarkable. I thought Luke Traynor was really good across half-back. I mean, there were large periods of last year where Luke Traynor, one of the other debutants for the Tigers, was considered a likely top 5 pick, and then he had some form and fitness issues back half of his under-18s year. He drifts out later in the draft, but they've got one there. And then Harry Armstrong did some nice things as well. So the 3 debutants for Richmond all contributed in different ways. But yeah, we spoke about Murphy Reid. It's going to be hard to top for the rising star nom, but I think if there is one man that's going to top him, it might be Sam Lawler.
When things aren't going right under Voss at Carlton, it's often the inside 50 targets that are criticised. And when you don't have Charlie Curnow, you need them to be perfect, and they weren't.
They just looked a disorganised football team. And I want you to look here, Xander, at how many times they bombed away to either Francis Evans or Zach Williams or Jesse Motlop one out or 1 on 2 or 1 on 3 or outnumbered deep forward. I mean, they were without Charlie Curnow, but there's one, Zach Williams. He's got 3 men around him there. Here's another one from Lockie Cowan, just kicks it straight to the top of the goal square. To who? Who's under that footy? It's Jesse Motlop there. So there's so many times where they just bomb away and they look really dysfunctional going forward. It's been a feature of this team under Michael Voss for such a long period of time now that they just bomb it long onto the heads of their small forwards, and they did it so many times here. So that was another one where Jesse Motlop had a 1 on 3. There's Jacob Weedon, one of their most experienced players, kicking to Francis Evans, outnumbered deep forward. There's another one, Zach Williams kicks to a deep forward contest where he's outnumbered. It just happened across the course of the night. And a lot of this is Richmond pressure. They put a lot of men behind the ball, particularly to start when they were getting blown out by to the tune of 41 points early in this game. And it's what helped them stabilise and get their way back into that contest. But Carlton needs to be better. They can't just be hitting it up on the top of their key forwards' heads. And normally it's Charlie Curnow who's outnumbered, but they do this so often under this coaching group. And it was another case of that on Thursday night as well.
41 points up they were in the second quarter, and Michael Voss, when addressing what a shocking loss it was post-match, was very open about how disappointing it was.
It was pretty disappointing. Yeah, I'm not going to sugarcoat it. It was to be in the position that we were in early in the match and to sort of, I guess, give up that lead and that position was, couldn't be more disappointed. As the game went, you could sort of see, clearly Richmond were gathering more energy. And as they're gathering it, sometimes you just got to stay in that fight when things aren't working for you, and we just weren't prepared to stay in that fight.
Another headline out of that game, of course, Tom Lynch given a 1-match ban for his bump on Tom De Koning. But in terms of where to next for the Blues, they don't have the easiest start to the year either. What do they need to do in the next few weeks to right the wrongs of Thursday night?
Well, they need to show effort, more competitiveness. I think this is Carlton's worst loss in 30 years, since that 1995 premiership. I mean, given the expectation on them going into the course of the year, given the occasion, first game of the season, given the opposition, a Richmond side that some people were tipping wouldn't win a game this year, given the fact they were 41 points up midway through the second quarter. I mean, I heard people say Richmond just crept over the line in the end, they just got the points, but they were a 10-goal better side than Carlton throughout that entire second half. And that's a really scary proposition for the Blues. They look disorganised. It can't all be their A-graders or no one. They've got to have players go with them, and they've got to get the list up to scratch in terms of that, in terms of building up the role players in this side. So, I mean, another difficult game Thursday night next week against Hawthorn. Then they've got the Bulldogs on a Friday night. Then they've got Collingwood on a Thursday night. They're in front of a lot of blockbuster crowds over the course of the next month, and they've got to improve rapidly. Otherwise, this season could spiral out of control for them.
Speaking of blockbuster crowds, Friday night with another massive one. 80,000 people packed the Coliseum for Hawthorn and Essendon. The Hollywood Hawks were in full swing, but gee, they were efficient as well.
Yeah, they're such a great side to watch when they're doing this, moving the ball from one side to the other. I reckon under Sam Mitchell, they're just about one of the best coached sides in the AFL at the moment because they transition so well from D50. Their kicking is fantastic. You see that one there from Carl Amon, just put it right on top of Nick Watson. They've got the forward line that can take advantage of that. And they look really scary. I mean, Essendon lost this game, but I honestly think they actually played pretty well, and they were just up against one of the best teams in it at the moment. I think Hawthorn is going to be renowned as one of the best teams in it because I think I looked at the Hawthorn start to the year and I thought, if you're going to get them, it's going to be early. Cal Shadir out of their best side, Mitch Lewis out of their best side, don't really have the forwards to kick to, but they've started 2-0 against two relatively good sides. So, yeah, they're looking like the team to beat at the moment, the Hawks. They look really dangerous. Well,
you touched on that the scoreboard didn't really tell the entire story for the Bombers. It wasn't a bad performance, and these numbers give a bit of context to what wasn't a terrible loss for them.
Yeah, I mean, they tried. They tried throughout the course of the night, and they gave a lot of effort and intensity, and I thought the fact they didn't let Hawthorn run completely over the top of them was really promising. This is the worry, though, for the Bombers, because over the course of the last 3 or 4 years, they've just got absolutely killed out of their forward 50, so they can't retain the ball. They've ranked 17th, 18th, 14th and 14th from points conceded from their defensive 50. They conceded 31 points against the Hawks on Friday night. So that's going to be the big concern for them moving forward. They need to be able to lock that up and address that. But otherwise, I thought they were relatively impressive. I mean, I think they get a pass mark for this. I think Hawthorn's going to be one of the best sides of the year. I thought their effort and their intensity around the ground was great. I thought Archie Perkins had a really good second half in particular. A few question marks around Mason Redmond starting in the midfield and just how long it took them to make that switch for Sam Durham to go in there. But I think once they sort those issues out, they could be a really competitive football side this year, Essendon.
Hawthorn's efficiency a big part of it. Let's have a look at some of their precision kicking, which really played a big part in that win.
Yeah, and particularly from this set move. So this is last week against Sydney, and we see just within 2 kicks, they get the ball out of their D50, out of their defensive goal square and into their forward 50 where they can really make a stand. And it was a set play, and I like this. I like giving an opposition the side a test in terms of trying to stop us, and they just couldn't stop them here, Sydney, and they do it again on Friday night. So this is against Essendon, where they just run and they gun and they move the ball so quickly from their D50. So this is the efficiency that we spoke about before. 2 kicks, it winds up in a goal for them. Connor McDonald kicks the goal in the end. They are so hard to beat when they do this. And the interesting part of this is that both of these kick-ins came around the same point in the game. So they came just early in the last quarter where they were able to move the ball from one side to the other. So it is a set play they're trying out. I'm interested to see if they make it 3 from 3 against Carlton next week.
The other big headline out of that game, of course, Jack Scrimshaw given a 3-match ban for his strike on Jordan Ridley. We're yet to see if the club will challenge it. They've got until Monday, so an interesting wait on that. Well, that's the round so far, Thursday, Friday and Saturday. Let's take a look ahead to the next few games. We've got Adelaide against St Kilda, Melbourne and the Giants, and West Coast and the Gold Coast through tomorrow. If those games have as much as the first few have, geez, it's going to be a great Super Sunday of the footy. Well, until then, until next week, we'll see you next time. It's been a great round so far. Thanks for joining us and catch you next Saturday.